Geospatial knowledge is underpinned in almost all economic sectors that are of national priority for governments worldwide. Technological innovations taking over and transforming the business processes have created new avenues for geospatial applications, innovation, and growing need for collaborative workflow in various business processes for the benefit of different sectors. With the changing geospatial industry landscape, there is an increasing need to collaborate and integrate data and solutions for efficient use of geospatial technologies for geospatial economy growth. And these collaborative workflows lead to significant business model transformations within the geospatial community. Let's hear out from our plenary speakers on how geospatial knowledge infrastructure and collaborative workflow is evolving to advance sustainability. What are the business models that will drive their business in the future? And what kind of collaborative workflows are they focusing on?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bisio, Senior Vice President with Trimble, and I've been really looking forward to this all day. Thanks, everyone, for coming back. It's great seeing all of you. Obviously, the title of the session is Geospatial Knowledge Infrastructure, Advancing Sustainability Through Collaborative Workflow. And we're going to broaden that to be a general addressing collaboration and the role of collaboration. We have industry, we have national mapping agencies, we've got a great panel. I'm looking forward to this. We've got 90 minutes, and we have what I think the mix of a great session. We've got a really compelling topic. It's extremely important. And we have really engaging industry experts. I've been on panels with just about everybody on this panel, I think. Maybe Tomaz, you're the first time, and Ingrid, first time, but I think everybody else, I've done this before. So this is going to be a good one. This is you get to enjoy yourselves. My challenge will be keeping everybody on time. So that's how we're going to work this. I think Jack Dangerman started the day off challenging us to collaborate. And I think that is really one of the things that's most important when we bring industry, academia, government together, NGOs. It's bringing that collaboration together. And the goal, as Jack talked about in his video, is really important. There's a lot on the line here. So I was reflecting on this topic of geospatial knowledge infrastructure, and I was thinking about how, obviously this is an engaging topic. It's something that's incredibly important for everyone as we drive sustainability, work on improving equality, equity. These are all really important things, and the GKI, or the Geospatial Knowledge Infrastructure, has an incredible role in enabling that. We as geospatial professionals have an important role in that, and I'm looking forward to hearing the panel's view on that. The second thing, which is a personal interest of mine, I actually believe that geospatial knowledge infrastructure has the ability to inspire. And who we really need to inspire is the next generation of geospatial professionals. We want students, children to choose academic careers and moving into the industry. Our industry needs young geospatial professionals to come in. And I believe that the geospatial knowledge infrastructure can inspire that next generation of professionals. And I'm looking forward to hearing members of the panel talking on this. And I know there's a lot of passion for that topic up here on the podium. So with that, I would like to make some quick introductions. Given the group that's up here, I could spend the 90 minutes on introductions, so we're going to be very brief. Starting over here, Dean Angelides, who is, sorry, I lost you there, Dean. Dean Angelides, Corporate Director for International Relations at Esri. I've seen you in probably every airport I can think of on the planet. It's great. It's great seeing you. Next up is Greg Scott from UNGGIM. He's a Secretariat for UNGGIM out of New York. Nigel Clifford, Deputy Chairman, Geospatial Commission for the UK. Alain Taeye, who's the board member for TomTom. This is a home game for Alain. His office is just close by. So, right. Jim Van Rens, who is one of the hardest working guys in the LiDAR industry for RIEGL. And Jim, again, also a road warrior that I've spent a lot of time on the road with. Tomaz PETEK, who's the Director General of Surveying and Mapping Authority for Slovenia. Welcome. Nice. And then finally, definitely last but not least, welcome to Ingrid Vanden, who's the Director for National Geographic Institute in Belgium. So welcome. All right. So why don't we start with some opening remarks, and then we'll have a couple of questions, and then I believe there's microphones, and we'll jump into questions for the panel. With that, I'm going to work from the inside out. So Nigel, if you don't mind starting.
Thanks, Ron. A big topic. So I thought the way I'd approach it is just talking quickly about what the Geospatial Commission was set up to do, what we're doing, and what we think we've still got to do. So initially, the Geospatial Commission was sent up to encourage collaboration around what we call the Geo6, which were the big 6 data holders from the geospatial perspective inside government, so Ordnance Survey, Geological Survey, Hydrographic Office, Land Registry, etc. So we've been working across that team in terms of policy making, but critically thinking about the geospatial knowledge infrastructure and the pyramid, looking at data. So we've been around for 3 years, and so for the first couple of years, it was very much around FAIR, so findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But also we added quality to that. So what's the data that's sitting inside those reservoirs actually look like? And we've issued a report, which was a slightly tense time, because no one likes to have their homework marked publicly. But we issued a report on the state of that data. And in general, cut to the chase, the interoperability was the piece which needed improvement. So we've then taken another step, which is looking at, okay, how do we encourage that? So data improvement programs, which we funded, making the use of data keys, so unique property reference numbers, free, so that people can now utilize those. So that's kind of sorting out the base level of the pyramid, the data. But then we're also looking at, well, what's stopping that being used and cascading upwards towards kind of knowledge and then wisdom? And so we've been looking at kind of the other end of the telescope, which is the users. And oftentimes we were looking from our end of the telescope, which is providers. And I will provide you with a data set. And then it's kind of up to you to find the other data sets which you might need to solve your use case. So we've picked on a few use cases where we've done that work for the industry. So particularly housing, property, infrastructure, creating repositories of housing and infrastructure and property data, land use, and then we're creating a whole new data set around underground assets. So we've got 4 million kilometers of pipes, 4 million holes being dug every year, and 4 million surprises as those holes are exposed. So we thought there must be a better way. So we're encouraging now collaboration, not just within government, but also with the private sector. So getting electricity, waste, gas, telecommunications to collaborate in exposing, in a safe and somewhat shrouded manner, their assets sitting under the surface. And then final couple of points before Ron hits the gong, is we've also thought beyond the data, because there's a couple of other things which could stop the evolution of the use of that information. One is ethics, and the other one is skills. So on ethics, we've started a conversation with the public around location data and the use of it. So what are the keep off the grass moments in terms of my data, my identity, and where is it that you're very happy for that data to be exposed? So we've now published the first round of that report, and I guess it was somewhat predictable, but we've now proven it that if you took a poll of people in this room, I guess we would say if the information is for the public good, for planning facilities, for emergency uses, please use it. If it's for my use or my good, then please use it. But if it's just purely for profit, not so sure. So putting that then into a set of policy guidelines is going to be a very delicate task. But that's really the next step for us, thinking through how do we get not just the producers of data happy, but also the co-producers of data who are almost accidentally contributing data. Then the final point, which just a very quick one, is skills. So all of this is very interesting, but if there's no one there who can mill the data, interpret the data, repurpose the data, then that's a challenge. So we're also looking at the skills availability across the UK in particular. Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Nigel. Thanks for kicking us off, and thanks for staying on time. You make it easy for me. Thinking about something that maybe you'll think about for when we get to the question and answer, I'd like maybe you to elaborate on security and some of the security aspects of the data, how we secure the data as we start to do things like utility data and bring in things like that. Maybe think about that one. Over to you, Alain.
All right. The need for collaboration is actually pretty much driven by the availability of data. And over the past 10 years, at least, we have seen a proliferation of sensors in all kinds of products, not in the least in consumer products. Now, a very good example of that, which you all know, is a GPS sensor. Right? The GPS sensor not only has allowed us to create navigation applications, but it also allowed us to really capture what is happening on our road network. And I want to give you an example of that, just to make clear what kind of collaboration I'm talking about. It's collaboration between the users of those sensors, which in this case is the car industry, fleet systems, but also more recently mobile phones. Right? And so if we look what we get today in as TomTom, we get 61 billion GPS data points per day. Now that doesn't ring a bell. I mean, it's a massive amount of information coming from 600 million different devices. And that can only happen when all those sources of those information decide to collaborate and to make sure that that information ends up in one production of knowledge, new knowledge which can be used, first of all, to have real-time traffic, which you have on your phone, which you have on your navigation, but much more, you can actually do all kinds of analysis. And just to give you a teaser what that means, those informations, I want to show this video if it plays. It basically gives you an idea of what that means for Amsterdam, right? So we've taken the probe information of Amsterdam, and down you see the time scale, right? And it's much fastened, obviously. But what it does, it gives you information that multiple times a day covers the whole street network of Amsterdam. And you can use that for all kinds of reasons. As I said, real-time traffic is important, but that information comes from tens of different companies, right? It's not a single company that has all of that information. So it's the collaboration between those companies that leads us to use that information to derive traffic information and to do all kinds of nice stuff with it, including actually making that information available to cities if they want so that they can optimize their mobility in the city. And that has become more and more important. So a next example, a very simple example, is you can, for example, compare, for those who live in the Netherlands, there was recently King's Day. It used to be Queen's Day. And on the top you see what happens with mobility in Amsterdam on King's Day, and on the bottom you see a normal, typical Saturday. So you can imagine that there is an enormous amount of difference. Having that information available allows cities, for example, to better plan their mobility in exceptional cases like, for example, in this video on King's Day. I would like to leave it at that and go to the next slide. One of the things, very simple example, more as a teaser to say how powerful collaboration can be, is if you compare, COVID has had an enormous impact on our society and on our mobility. And if you compare what happens, so you see 2020, and this is 2019. So it's all red, and in 2020 you saw a couple of months where it's actually green. For the first time we saw our road networks not overconsumed. So we took that a bit further and we did all kinds of analysis. I only have 5 minutes, I can't go into the details. But that's the power of such a collaboration. You can analyze the data, and data don't lie. Right? So here you see we're not back at all in 2021 at the same level of congestion as in 2019. the information I'm talking about, we can use that information globally. Right, so it's not only Amsterdam. I showed you Amsterdam, but if you want to look at what did COVID do to the rush hours, well, the main conclusion is it moved the rush hours. So it dampened the peaks and it moved the rush hours by a couple of hours. Don't underestimate the impact that working from home has on mobility. And with that kind of information, you can measure that. And you can basically, for all those cities, top 10 cities in the, you can measure what is the highest congestion, how did they evolve, how did they progress with their mobility plans to lower congestion and as such create a better and more sustainable world. I want to leave it at this.
Thanks. I really like the way you tied that together at the very end of how they can improve sustainability and model it. That's really great. I think the other thing that came through with that is the collaboration between, as you said, users who may or may not even know that they're actually collaborating with it, and then the industries such as cell phones, and then even government that's putting up the satellites and running the satellite infrastructure. Yeah. So that's another great example of collaboration. So thank you, Alain.
Thank you.
Greg, over to you. Slides?
No slides.
Very good.
Thank you. I guess I'm from the United Nations, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the context of collaboration through the global process, which is driven by countries. And for those that may not be so familiar with UN GKI, and I won't expand on that because it's complex in itself, it's probably easier to just look it up on the web, but it's really about positioning geospatial information to address our global challenges. And it's really looking at the means around policy and governance and means to implement development agendas with geospatial information. It's probably fair to say that 3 or 4 years ago, when at GWF we were talking about the Sustainable Development Goals and the SDGs and sustainability, there wasn't really a lot of understanding of what it meant in our community. But today, already today, we've heard about sustainable development, sustainability, the SDGs multiple times. And so we're really moving forward and moving the dial forward very, very quickly. And there's a reason for that. It's because we need to. And as we start seeing more in terms of our vulnerabilities around the world, and we're seeing more of our development challenges growing rather than decreasing, the role of geospatial information has become more and more critical. The role of knowledge infrastructures, of integrated frameworks, has become more and more critical. But the one key element that really brings it all together is this collaboration. Coordination and collaboration amongst communities of experts, with data, with technology, with industry, with governments. It's really important. And I think as we start blending together these concepts now of our new knowledge systems, of our new future SDIs and what geospatial and the nebulous nature and cross-cutting nature of it is, that one thing that it does, a bit as Alain just showed then with road networks and vehicle moves, and that's really a collaborative network, and we need to be able to do that more towards development. And so I think as we as a community move forward, it's going to be incumbent on us, as we now talk more about development, how we refocus some of our efforts towards development when we think about, for example, a simple topic like climate change. One of the challenges in climate change is that it's a long distance and a long-term effect that we need to think about. But another dimension to that is that it affects every person in every country of the world. But it's a social impact, it's an economic impact, and it has an environmental impact. But if we all bring that collaboration together and the things that we've been talking about today and will over the next few days, it provides us with an opportunity to provide guidance to many, many people around the world, not only society, but also governments and leaders and decision makers. And it's going to be incumbent on us, I think, and this is my final note, to message what we do at the levels that need to hear what we do, but to act on what we do. And I think that's going to be very, very important to pick up on the mantra already mentioned, to leave no one behind. It's going to be very critical. So thank you for that brief opportunity, Ron, and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Greg. Maybe to give some thought to a question that'll be coming your way around best practices you've seen in your travels and in your experiences for collaboration. Alain, maybe where would you like to see collaboration going next? What would be the next sources and other things you'd like to see come in? Just give that some thought, and we'll come back around. Jim, please.
Yes, if you'll bring up the slides, please. Early 1990s, I was involved in laser range finding. Fabulous technologies, very exciting time. In 1993, I took a laser rangefinder and taped it onto one of Charlie Trimble's GPS vans. And the purpose for that was to try and determine clearances for bridges. So that's where my interest in the technology started. And what I would like to do very quickly is to tie the technology to sustainability. The satellites, camera systems, LiDAR systems, hyperspectral, all the different types of sensors that are out there, where they're all at, they're from space down to the ground and below ground. And of course, we've got very powerful softwares and advance again, and lots of data management, visualization, spatial analytics. We've got the cloud, the web, data portals, real-time geospatial information. And next slide, please. And these are all of the areas that we deal in. It is a complex ecosystem. The geospatial industry plays a vital role in developing innovative products for environmental resilience. Next slide, please. And so there's one of our clients, for instance, developed a tree mapper. Next slide, please. Yep, keep going. Terrific. So from a technology standpoint, these are some of the elements that needed to be pulled together. And next slide, please. So let's get down to trees. In the Eurozone, in the last year, you added probably 10% to the asset base of trees. And in the Eurozone, particularly in the Netherlands, tree inventories are a critical and important element. And there's a reason for that. So trees have tremendous benefits. They provide cleaner air, they combat climate change, they save energy, they capture rainwater, they clean the rainwater. So trees are absolutely a critical element of our urban life. And so when we take all of that technology together and bring it down to a very simple look, so this is a digital capture of tree data, and it creates a digital twin. So this is kind of a very specific example of a lot of the large concepts we've been discussing today. So what it does is it gives us an automated methodology to be able to very efficiently and quickly capture all the tree information of an urban area, puts it into a fabulous database that's easily accessible. It determines, of course, all the dimensional aspects of the tree. It also shows poor tree vitality or robust tree vitality. So there's a number of elements that are very important in terms of managing the overall tree structure. You know, so you see cool zones, you're avoiding water runoff, you're taking hotspots in the urban area and minimizing the impact of heat, etc. And so this is where technology really can identify and assist in the management of a critical natural resource for the betterment of our world. So I just wanted to bring home a small example as to how these big, complex technology elements are really brought home and serve us.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Maybe some things to think about. You know, you and I were talking in the airport about point clouds and technology to answers. And what are some of the exciting trends you're seeing and how we can help customers, the industry, our users move to some of the answers, like what is their tree density, how many trees do they have, those kind of things. Let's maybe give that some thought. Maybe we'll switch it up since I have a couple of 8 national mapping agencies and then Esri left. So maybe Tomaz, if you don't mind, we'll go with you next, please.
Thank you. Hear me? I came from Slovenia, from one of the smallest, but for sure one of the beautiful country in the Central Europe. And we, as a national mapping cadastral agency, we are responsible for land cadastre, for mapping process, and also for mass valuation in our country. Our agency were relatively early faced with the truth that we need to collaborate quite widely. It was started already in the 90s when we established a register of spatial units and addresses, where this is one of the key registers in our country, used also by statistical office and also the Minister of Internal Affairs and also the court who lead the business register in Slovenia. We continue with this collaboration afterward when we get a new area of work. This was a mass valuation process and appraisal for real estate, when we need to collaborate, could you imagine, with Ministry of Finance, which is not always easy. And after that, we start to be the Inspire National Contact Point, which is also the role of coordinator and collaborator in the field of geospatial data in early 2000 and 2007, 2000, and until now. So afterward, we also have a very big project to establish the underground utility cadastre, where we start to collaborate with utilities, and not only utilities but municipalities. In the small territory of Slovenia, we have 211 municipalities, and each of them is responsible for utility, different type of utility data. And we established so-called consolidated data set, where all those utilities disseminate and share data with us, not all of details, but some important part of utility cadastres. And the end, but we also just finished project where we establish so-called spatial information system together with the ministry responsible for spatial planning, where we succeed to merge together data about spatial planning, and also the data about land cover is now so-called part of official cadastre system. This is maybe not so complicated, but when you mention so much collaboration and cooperation, then became a little bit complicated, and this we solve in a way that we need to constantly update, educate, or also raise an awareness not only between the governmental institutions in Slovenia, but now also with the external world, because we are here because of our users, and users are more and more, have more and more high requests to daily, not only data, nowadays they are asking for services, and of course to achieve this, this request is important to not only inform, but also to show the possibility how the geospatial data could be combined, and what is the real value, what is the positional accuracy of those different types, which we now very transparently put together, which was, this problem doesn't exist when we have everything on paper on our files. So, and all this, what I'm speaking about, is faced us that we need to also reflect somehow on the organizational side to following these challenges, which is not easy, because, as I say, we belong to the part of the governmental agency, so it's regulation about the organizational phase and status, etc. But somehow, with the collaboration with academia and also with the industry, we succeed to following those trends which are going on now also regionally and globally. And for those reasons, we're following also activities within some international associations, and we try to be an active part within the United Nations Group of Experts for Global Geospatial Information Management, and also within the Geographic Association of National Mapping Authorities. So in that way, we are fully aware about the importance of knowledge, about the importance of collaboration, but sometimes it is easy to say than to realize. We establish also the Center of Knowledge within our agency to give opportunities for our employees, which need to face with some kind of new type of works, which was not existing in the past. So this is a constant process, which we try to be actively involved, and I hope that we will succeed to following this.
Great. Thank you, Tomaz. Maybe something to think about for a question that I'm going to come to you with. So the collaboration and sharing you did with the utilities, what was the incentive on the side of the utilities to collaborate and to share the data? Something to think about. I'll come back with that question. These are, by the way, these are my personal questions that I'm coming up with as I'm hearing them. So hopefully you guys are thinking of your questions as well, because we'll take them from your side as well. Thank you, Tomaz. Over to you. Dean.
May I get my slides, please? Thank you, Ron. What I'd like to do is carry on just a little bit. Thank you, Alain. Carry on a little bit from the initial messages from Jack this morning and sort of put I think a positive spin, especially for this group here. We're all part of an amazing group of individuals who I think are really have the capability and the knowledge really to bring the changes that have to come about to help us become more sustainable. And we need to change priorities, but we also have the methods. So what it really takes is a commitment, frankly, from all of us to the future and to future generations. And we can begin this now. What you see here is a group of common challenges. Maybe they're not in one country or one community, but they're happening all around us. And as Jack mentioned, it's going to take applying our best science, our best technology, and of course, creativity to help us address these issues. And in Jack's words, the geographic approach is going to be essential here. We spent about 3 days before this conference with a group of really great people, 40 people from about 33 countries in this workshop about geospatial knowledge infrastructure, or GKI, for a new acronym for many of us. And this is really about expanding what we've called SDIs beyond just data and discovering data to more or less where we are now, which is really through a set of federated portals into something that allows us to integrate and use directly from a quite complete digital ecosystem. And what Sanjay has done for us here is bring together, let's say, some of the, maybe we just call them the seminal groups of people who can begin to understand and work on how we actually do this. So GKI really is about interconnecting through web services and data. And these are web services that are not just raw data. It's actually information products that emerge in various places here. So, this is more of the technology view, but it's also a business view that shows us amazing sets of opportunities as we begin to try to build out this very diverse ecosystem of this geospatial knowledge infrastructure. I'm also going to add in something that we've had a fair amount of discussion here, which is about the integration of digital twins. These first digital twins, and we heard from Mr. Reddy, that this originated really with aircraft engines, thank goodness, that those digital twins were used to understand the performance of those engines so the right predictive analytics could be done so the right preventative maintenance would keep the aircraft in the air. I personally really appreciate that digital twin, even though I don't necessarily know about it. Okay, so that's really what, as an industry, we're going to need to start doing. Okay, so we hear about BIM as a building information model, and land information models, or LIMS, or city information models, or SIMS, or network information models, or NIMS. Okay, but basically what we're looking to do is interconnect the content, the behavior, and the workflows in collaborative ways to solve those planning, or those, let's say, those problems that we were facing. And so there are, on the left-hand side here, there's sort of a list of topical or discipline areas like smart cities and natural resources and so on. But all these, as we know, are very much interconnected. And so what we actually need to do is have these interconnected digital twins, which actually supply us with the knowledge and support for decision making, and ultimately to help us better collaborate at a community level. And I guess my final comment here is that it's really at the community level that we need to supply this information, because my experience is that that's where the desire for collective action is the strongest. So I think we see kind of a fragmentation going on within, nations. Nationalism is very important for, in a sense, obvious reasons. But then when you actually get to the community level, people at that level are interested to come together to solve their common challenges. So a new, I would say, pattern is beginning to emerge of community activism and community GKI to help those communities to understand the full context of the problems that they're trying to solve.
Thank you, Dean. So Dean, looping back to what I said in the beginning about inspiring the next generation, maybe give some thoughts. I'm going to come back to you in a little bit. I think Esri does the best job in the industry of just marketing and messaging the positive impact of what we do as an industry. I think it's kudos to the company, and I think it's great. That's where I point people to talk about all the great things geospatial can do. So what I would actually say to you is, what's the call to action to us as a group to inspire the next generation? What would you do coming from your perspective? So maybe give that some thought, please. Okay. Ingrid, last but definitely not least. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ingrid Vanden Berghe, and 20 years ago, time flies, I was appointed head of the Belgian mapping agency. And at that period, some people told me, "What are you doing? It's a sinking ship. This is old school." And I said, well, I love challenges. And I also saw how promising and interesting it would be to get this organization into a new role and into a new motor. And we've been working very hard at NGI to develop that. And so I could talk for a whole day about it. I'm not going to do that. But just it's a shift from being the data producer that produces whatever he or she thinks is needed into the organization that makes sure that people have the geodata they need and that they don't have to lose time to find it. So we call it the geo broker, where you are much more the person trying to organize access to data, use of data, rather than just sit in your corner and produce it. So that's a challenge, and in a organization like mine, which is politically totally irrelevant, nobody cares, nobody bothers, but still you have to do the job. And then you can see how important it is to have collaboration. You cannot do that on your own. You can't achieve such a mission on your own, because you're not the user. The users are at the military department, at the security department, at the resilience crisis center and so on, or in the environmental department at local level and so on and so on. So that's a you really have to collaborate. It's not a wish, it's not an objective, it's just an obligation. It doesn't work otherwise. And if you're a small organization like we are, this means you have to be very, how can I say that? You don't have to boast how good you are, you just have to do the job and allow other people to put the plumes on their head, like we say in Dutch. And you know that the only thing you have to do is make sure that people who know about what's going on, that they can see that that plume is not from a chicken, it's from the nice bird that you have developed into. So that's the first thing which I think is important. If you want to collaborate, you cannot say, I'm going to say how and I'm going to say what. You have to listen and be open and get out of your comfort zone. So it's a challenge, and the more complex the environment is that you are working in, the more difficult it is to do this collaboration, and the more you have to sometimes step aside from your own opinion, from your own immediate benefit to get this benefit for the whole of the collaboration. And so I think that's very important when we talk about collaboration, and that's where we as an NGI are trying to get onto that road. And in a complicated country like Belgium, I can assure you it's a challenge, so I'm not going to go any more into that. But there are some challenges that I see where I would like this audience to reflect on. And that is, people often discuss about governmental data should be open and everybody has to use it and so on and so on. And I am an advocate of making sure that our data are used more because they are authoritative data, and it's important for certain decisions that you have quality, that you have good data. So if for having that, I have to open my data and distribute them throughout the world for free, I can understand that, even though I'm not an advocate, because the risk of completely government-funded data is that there is not enough money to fund the data and that the quality of these authoritative data is degrading. So I think it's a very important challenge to make sure that balance is right. And then there is more a philosophical question which I have, and it's a challenge towards industry. Like Alain said earlier, the systems available today are collecting billions and trillions and I don't know how many millions amount of data, which could be very, very, very useful for government. And so the Googles and the TomToms and so on, they are sitting on large amounts of data, which are part of their assets. I can understand, that's the business model. But government should get access to that data for free, if you ask me. If government gives it the data for free, then government should get that data for free so that the governments can make better decisions. So whoever wants to take up the challenge, I'm happy to talk about that. Now, there's another challenge I would like to put in this room, and that's a challenge about the young professionals. There is a shortage of workforce in our industry. I hear it every time again. Now, there is, and you can see it in this panel, there is a gender disbalance in this industry. That's also a fact. So, I would like to invite everybody to look around him, because I'm sure there are young women in your company who are doing a good job, but they need somebody to be their mentor, to be their coach. So please, everybody, take one young professional in your immediate surroundings, in your company, in another company, no matter, and get them to overcome their hesitations, to overcome their gender-biased ideas about performance and so on, and make sure they get to the next level. And then the next challenge I want to give, because I'm not here just to talk, I think I'm here to challenge. So I would also like you to talk to young people in their 15, 16, boys and girls, tell them how passionate you are about geo, and show them what orientations they can take in their studies to get to that profession, because there is not such a thing as the University of Geospatial. It's hidden in the bioscience engineering department, in the computer science department, in the geography department. But at the same time, in our secondary schools, geography is not the favorite subject of the students. It's, you know, it's not always attractive. So it could be much better, but still, even then, we should talk to people, to young people, about our passion for our industry and show them that there is so much they can do for the world by taking up that kind of a study. So that's, I think, what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ingrid. I knew there'd be some good call to action out of here, and I appreciate you spicing it up as well, keeping the audience awake here after lunch. One of the things that you mentioned actually was early in your speech was around the organization that you've developed. Maybe give some thought. I'm going to come back around to you, but how have you developed? How have you encouraged an organizational culture that encourages collaboration? Because that's a difficult thing to bring in. Sometimes people get a little tribal, you get the silos. Think about how we build the culture inside our organizations where collaboration is encouraged. So please. Tomaz, I'm going to come back to you because I think you hit on something that was really interesting when you talk about the incentivizing people to collaborate. How did you do that with the utilities?
I didn't emphasize that our data policy is totally open, free of charge also for all purposes, for private and commercial, and also, of course, for public, which is good and bad, but I don't go deeply in that. But this cooperation with municipalities was based, of course, still on some kind of legal obligation, because they this cooperation is initiated better if it's based on some kind of legal obligation, unfortunately. But this is also in the both, how could I say, both interests of both parties. So all data which utility companies on behalf of municipalities participate in the consolidated underground cadastre or utility cadastre, which goes not only underground, are then available together with all other data back to them. So what exists on some kind of backyard and what exists in a particular land parcel is then much more transparently available and avoid some damages and some kind of misunderstanding at the end. So we were surprised that this interest, even if it's okay, it was, let's say, legally obliged for the utilities, but they also take these technical solutions which we offer. So the upload and download was done, and it's done by internet. So there's no paper immediately needed. So and of course we must prescribe the forms and exchange format. But this was quite fast realized for the entire country for all type of utilities, because there is really many stakeholders in other side in that case.
Very good, thank you. Like I said, I think that incentive is really important, and I think, you know, talking about inspiring next generation, we're building out augmented reality solutions which are going to look at underground utilities. But of course, we've got to collect the underground utility data to build out the augmented reality system. So I think that's an important part of it. So thank you for that example. Greg, maybe over to you. Maybe other examples of some best practices in collaboration around geospatial knowledge infrastructure.
Well, I guess I'd like to look at a big collaboration. And that's the collaboration between countries. In essence, UNGGIAN was put together because of the need for collaboration and coordination around the world. It's only a decade old, but it has convening power, and that's really where its strength is at. And that collaboration comes from all of those that are participating in it. It includes leaders here, those from countries, industry, private sector, academia, institutional organisations from around the world that come together and look at how we can best push forward the agenda that we have. And I guess one of the examples of that is when countries were developing one of the elements that sort of contributes into the GKI now, which is the Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, or the IGIF, that process evolved through the participation of 133 countries from around the world. So that was nearly 800 participants got together over 18 months and 15 workshops and basically determined an outcome that is now a global framework that's been used around the world. That would never ever have happened without collaboration, would never have happened without understanding, and more importantly, it would never have happened in the way that it has if the developing countries didn't have such a strong voice in the way it was put together, because they brought in the perspectives that mattered more than the developed world. And I think that's one of the features of our community. It's very, very global. And whilst we talk very much about our advances in technology and the expectation that we have so many services, including internet bandwidth and electricity and all of those nice things, there's many parts of the world that don't yet have that luxury. And so it's really been able to look at how we scale our capabilities, and when we know how to bring the enabling technologies and infrastructure to support them as they get it to a level of maturity, which is both about capacity and education and skills, but also it's actual financial resources as well and governance arrangements. But that's all about that collaboration.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. So Nigel, didn't mean to put you on the spot here about the security question, and maybe I was projecting a little of my own thoughts and concerns. But I think about collaboration and bringing data together. What are some of the security concerns and frameworks you've seen that are?
I'll take the speaker's privilege just responding quickly to Ingrid. So one of my other roles is president of the Royal Geographical Society, and we are just obsessed with the conversation which you were just throwing out into the room. So we should definitely have a drink afterwards on that.
We're going to get back around to that.
So it feels a bit parochial to be talking about the security side, but it is pretty darn important. And so we looked at 3 levels of security in the work that we're doing. So there's the personal, there's the commercial, and then there's the national security side of things. So for the underground asset activity that we've been involved in, very interested in the experiences elsewhere, it was very much the commercial and the national security that we were concerned about. And so part of it was providing incentives for people to even conceive of sharing their data. And some of that was through an economic study. So we looked at £2 to £4 billion worth of damage or losses every year through strikes, pipe strikes, and then thinking about, right, how can we make a difference to that? And therefore, is there even a conversation to start? And people knew it intuitively. They'd seen Click and Clip and Volt as other examples of that across Europe. But then it was not enough to say, right, this is a good thing, please do it. We had to broker it. And so part of the getting to know you was doing some proofs of concept. So people kind of lowering their defensive shields, checking their weapons at the door and thinking, okay, how could we make this happen in a way that we're comfortable with? And it wasn't just the owners of the data that we had to bring together. We had to bring together the national security side, because this is critical national infrastructure that we are saying, simply, we are going to make this available. And that's quite a scary thought if you're in charge of safeguarding the nation. So we had the National Cybersecurity Centre, the Critical National Infrastructure Protection Agency, as part of those proofs of concept. So that began a collaborative conversation about the end is worth it. We've got the means. How do we make those actually work together to create something? And so through 2 proofs of concept, one in the north of England, one in London, about 40 stakeholders, we designed both an infrastructure and, God bless the lawyers, they were the people who were at the table and duking it out in terms of the art of the possible, what was secure, what was not secure, what could be shared, on what terms it could be shared. So ultimately, some of the answers to the security question were, we are not going to hold any of this data centrally. It's going to be distributed. We are going to call into the data. It's going to be fragmentary. So you are going to have a couple of square meters, and that's it. It's going to be momentary, so you're not going to have it to take away forever. You're going to have it to plan to, and then it disappears. And then it's also going to be grant back. So if you do dig your hole and you find things which you weren't planning to find, or we didn't tell you were there, then you've got to update that, and you've got to grant that back. So there were a number of aspects that were in the preparation and in the delivery of this, which were designing security in from the start. And that was involving the security experts, involving the lawyers, and ultimately making the answer fit around the constraints of those teams. But we've now got about 650 data holders that we're in conversation with, and we've got about 100 of them signed up to the data sharing agreement. So progress being made, and we believe being done in a secure fashion.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. That's, again, as you mentioned, really important topic, and we're in the plumbing there, but it is critical to it. So, Alain, we've talked about examples of collaboration, some incentives for it, the security issues behind it. You did show a really impressive video of collaborating amongst data sets and government users, things like that. What's next in collaboration? What excites you?
What excites me? Hello? Hello?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
No.
No. Sorry for that.
Maybe it got turned off. No. No. Looks like it's green. No.
It should work, but it doesn't. Can you hear me in the back? Fine. What excites me in terms of collaboration is that we, if you look at the world, you can model the world with data. And that is true for everything we have in the world. So if we want to change the world, we need to make sure that we make most use of the data that are available. So the kind of collaborations that I'm looking, the kind of collaborations I'm looking forward to is, most in particular, is the exchange of data. And to some extent, I agree with what Ingrid has said, right? If all of that information would be free for all, I would be a happy camper, right? Because if I showed you the information, but that information is the result of hard negotiation with all kinds of parties where we give something that is valuable to their business and they give something that is valuable to our business, and the goal is to improve the products and the business as such. It's very hard to break that equilibrium, right? It's like asking Google that they put all of their search results in the public, right? That they put all of their data in the public. So the most important thing in collaboration is that you basically give and take. You give something and you take something. In my mind, it doesn't make sense to have all kinds of laws, let alone on a country level, that forces you to give something, but that doesn't give you anything back. That in my mind doesn't work. What can work, absolutely, if you would have a global instrument that is forceful enough to basically say, listen, as of now, all these and these data are common good, then industry will adapt to that. But you can't do it on an exception basis and say, yes, you need to do it in Belgium, no, you can't do it in India, and so on and so on. That doesn't work for the global industry. And you have to make sure that if you construct those kinds of forced collaborations, right, that you make sure that the big guys, like Google, because TomTom compared to Google is only a very small player, that Google basically adheres to those rules. And that is a very difficult thing. So data collaborations are really hugely important in the future. I think barter deals in terms of business model are making a hell of a lot of sense, right? And I think that the geospatial industry should look outside of their own industry. Because if you look at the geospatial world, they're not the biggest producers of geospatial information. Mobile phones and cars produce far more geospatial information than any professional device we know. So looking outside of the geospatial industry and then forging collaborations makes a hell of a lot of sense to me.
That's a really great point. I love that. I love how you ended that on talking about what we consider non-traditional sources of data collection, and is really great. Thank you. Jim, over to you. I really liked the tree mapper example a lot. And again, you and I have talked about this, about how we help customers and the users in the industry move to getting answers out of the spatial data. I think that's what we as an industry have matured to, is that we now realize people want answers from the data that we're collecting for them. Where do you see that accelerating?
So I'd actually like to try and pick up where Ingrid left off. One of the critical information pieces is a point cloud. Mm-hmm. So we have data points from imagery, we have data points from LiDAR, we have data points from radar. And one of the key aspects is, what is the quality of that data point? And as an industry, we're utilizing formats that were developed decades ago. The technology has moved dramatically. The use of the data is just growing daily. The amount of data being accumulated is enormous. And how do we say this is good data and this is bad data? And I think the geospatial industry has got to rise up to the challenge and collaborate as an industry, utilize other industries' examples of good collaboration, without a doubt, and really address some of the needs that we have to be able to provide you with a reliable source of quality that you can then remove the risk from your organization as you disseminate that data. So I think from a little sensor manufacturer, you know, we have to get at those little deep in the weed type of situations and scenarios.
And thanks for tying all those topics together. That was really nicely done. Well done. Thank you. Dean, I mentioned optimism from Esri. Just a great example of the messaging of the great things this industry is doing to improve sustainability. What's the call to action for us here?
Well, so here's an observation. I mean, I have I'm kind of a unique position where sometimes I'm home, and most of the time I'm engaged somehow. Okay, for a couple of years I didn't really do any international travel, but now I'm back into that way of working again, which, by the way, it's fantastic to be here. But I guess the thing that is most striking to me is that we, as individuals in the geospatial community, are actually uniquely adapted to think spatially and to think about problem solving in different ways. My sister is a neurobiologist or a neuroscientist. She's a professor at University of California, San Diego. And she tells me that the human brain actually develops differently when people are exposed to spatial data and make a lot of use of maps and spatial information. She's mapped it, in the brain. So your brain is different. So I can say, not only do you have experience, but your brain works differently to solve these problems. And I saw it firsthand here yesterday in a workshop where geospatial professionals that were part of this GKI workshop, in the matter of 10 minutes, could quickly run through. They identified a problem that's common within their countries. And they identified the sets of information that were needed to be able to address the decision making associated with that problem and how to monitor it and so on. I mean, all the things we're talking about here. 10 minutes, and we had like 5 different problems where we had the conceptual framework to solve it. So I think we want to, I guess the optimism for me comes that we really do have a global community here. And so the call to action for us is to, number one, help young people develop differently where spatial thinking and spatial literacy is just part of who they are, because that's what we need. Part number one. Part number two, I believe, is to encourage joint problem solving. I mean, I could go on this forever, and I actually get emotional when I think about it. But I look at some special teachers. We've had some of those on our at our user conferences present. I mean, there's just extraordinary people who just provide opportunities to students, whether it's an advantaged group of students in a community or a disadvantaged or a place where there's a lot of crisis and so on. I mean, when these people come together, just naturally, as I say, as a community, they become responsible to each other for solving problems. So enable communities, enable young people, and you yourself become mentors and enablers with the knowledge and the resources you have to make these things happen. And I'll just say from Esri's perspective, we have many programs that are available to, let's say from a software or a SaaS, we'll just say software perspective. We have grants available for any school essentially in the world at this point. Universities have easy and open access. Young professionals actually have easy and open access. So let's say there's no shortage of the technology, and then if we enable them as people just to make them aware, so we scale everything up, then I think we have a chance.
That's great, Dean. One of the things that really interesting you just mentioned, exposure to spatial data activates the brain.
In a different way.
In a different way. Right. And having a 16-year-old son, I've been looking for what activates the brain. And so now I've actually got the key. And I think it's really important because I think there's great examples that I've been, even just at lunch, I was talking to the gentleman from Dutch Cadastre who was talking about Geo Week that they're doing with the children here in Holland. And I thought that was a great way to activate the brains of the children that will be sitting in this room someday giving these presentations. So thank you, Dean. Ingrid. So I saved you for last for two reasons. One, the topics you brought up are incredibly important. We're going to talk about organizations, and we're going to talk about diversity and how we drive those. And second, you're excellent for audience ratings. So I thought that would be great. We could end on that, and we will get much better survey results. Yeah. So let's talk about encouraging collaboration and encouraging diversity. How do you build that in an organization?
Yeah. Well, encouraging diversity, it's recognizing that there is diversity and use it to your benefit. And so you were saying your son, you're really looking how to activate his brain in a geospatial way, I hope. Yeah. Well, he's using Instagram. He's probably, not now, but he has been playing with the Pokemon Go game and so on. So they are geospatially enabled. We just don't know. We are not in that world. Yep. So we just have to tell them that building Pokemon Go is geospatial information. In Instagram, it's geospatial information they can use on Twitter, whatever. So it's about how to sell the geospatial dimension. And we often say, geospatial, it's about where. Everything happens somewhere, and this somewhere, that's what we do. And I think it's a very strong point, but it's also valid to the young people. Yeah, agreed. So use that to talk to them about geospatial. I think that's important. So tell your son he's a geospatial professional because he uses all those things.
That's great.
And make him interested to know more about it. I think that's certainly a point. Now, about building a culture of collaboration in an organization, I think the first point is you have to choose to collaborate. It should not be imposed on you. It's not with a law or whatever, like Alain said. You have to choose to collaborate, and you have to be passionate about it. And the collaboration is the goal. It's not because you'll get something out. Yeah, of course, but it has to be the goal that you say, okay, we want to do this together because we understand that it is too big and too important to do this just me in my corner. And in such a collaboration, if you want to be successful, you have to appreciate every effort and take into account every need. And so it's not really a collaboration if you, as a very big whatever, country, company, organization, say, this is where I'm going, and if you want, you can hop on the train. No, you have to ask, where do you want to go? And maybe we can make a little detour and take your bit on the way. And that's real collaboration. So I think it's appreciate every effort and at the same time carry the weight according to the broadness of your shoulders. So smaller companies in a collaboration, maybe they can only do little bits, but they should be appreciated at the same level as the big ones who can afford to do big things. And then you grow trust and respect. And these are two elements that are essential in collaboration. If you don't trust each other, you can go part of the way together, but you'll still be looking what's in it for me, who's behind my back, and so on. So maybe and often I am very naive and I believe everybody's in it for the better, which is not the case. I learned that. And I have staff around me to tell me, it's not always, not everybody's well-intentioned. So, but still, I think we should start with a point of trust and respect. We respect you for the organization or the people you are, and we try to understand and work together. And if you get to that point that there is trust and respect, then you get to the really important point in collaboration, and that is that you are willing and able to share your vulnerabilities and your mistakes, because you learn so much more from things that went wrong than from things that are going smoothly. And so in a collaboration, this should be shared and this should be informed. And then I think you have a culture of collaboration. And you cannot do all of that if you look for quick benefits. Right. It's not the quick and easy. It's not possible with a collaborative approach. So that's my guiding principles when we are working around collaboration.
That's great. And I think you even mentioned something, maybe you didn't even realize you were mentioning it, but you were talking about how your team felt comfortable telling you when collaboration wasn't, what they needed more. And that's an open dialogue that you have with your team, and your team feels comfortable saying that.
Well, with your team and with your partners in this collaboration. Yeah. And so the successful collaborations I've seen, and also, you go to conferences and everybody says, oh, look how great I am. Well, these are interesting examples, but sometimes I don't really learn a lot of it. I learn more when somebody says, I tried it this way and it didn't work. And retrospect, I see, well, maybe that's why it didn't work, or maybe I did this thing wrong. Sure. And so I think that's important to share that as well. And this can only be shared in an environment where you have trust and respect. Excellent. And so within a collaboration that really works, you can do that. And we have some very good examples between the national mapping agencies where this really works. Now, of course, we are not competition amongst ourselves. I'm the mapping agency for Belgium and he's for Slovenia and so on. So we are not competing. Right. So then it's maybe easier to develop this collaboration. But still, you have to show how vulnerable you are. You have to listen, how did you do that? And also be open to other approaches than your own. That's and great. I think that really helps.
That's really good. And one last thing, when you were talking about encouraging diversity, you mentioned mentoring people. Yes. And any other things you would really encourage us to think about in our organizations for encouraging diversity?
Well, I think reaching out to young people there's so many things you can do, and one of the recent projects I've been involved in, which I'm quite challenged. It's working with people who have autism spectrum disorder. So there are some companies and schools in Belgium that we have been in contact with, and one is a school where children are studying who have the autism spectrum disorder, but they have it in such a severe way that they cannot complete a normal school curriculum. There are other people with the autism spectrum that are very highly intelligent, dedicated professionals, and there are companies employing those people to in a really competitive way, if I can say this in terms of company. But so there are also a group which are more on the let's say the more difficult for them. And this school has been looking at those, working with those people, with those young people, to see how can we learn them something in a field where there is a need for professionals, even without this sheet of paper saying I have a diploma. And so they have been looking into geospatial and artificial intelligence, and they have very successfully train those people to be a professional in this business. And so now they've been going on for a few years, and now they are seeing, okay, can we develop some kind of a, we call it a protective environment, which can provide commercial services where these people can do the training of machine learning machines or detection of objects and stuff like that. So it's really very interesting, and we learn a lot from working with these kind of people. And it's really heartwarming when one of those guys who has a passion for high tension pillars where the power lines. Yeah. So, and he, on his own, he had been mapping all the high tension poles of his province, and then he came to visit us in our 3D production environment where we do the obstacle survey, and he saw, oh, these wonderful machines and everything. So he was so passionate. It was heartwarming for our staff to see how he was enjoying just seeing within the 3D environment, and we gave him a test. And so these are small things. It's not a lot, but it opens the eyes of our staff to these kind of people, and it opens the world of what we are doing to people in that situation. So I think these are small initiatives that organizations can take, which are enriching for both.
Yeah, both sides win in that. That's great. That's great. Thank you very much. Well, first off, before we take a few questions, I would like to thank my panel, because I didn't actually feed these questions ahead of time. So these were great answers and responses, and really heartfelt responses in real time. So thank you very much, all of you. So we also stayed to time. So well done. So we have a few minutes for a few questions from the audience. I'm going to struggle with the light a little bit. I see the shirt in blue here.
Hello, Hello, my name is Andy Dandeli from Precisely. This is a question for the non-commercial organisations, and I want to expand on the point that Ingrid just mentioned about trust. I don't just mean about trust between you and the partners. I want to talk a little bit about trust in data. As we're in a world that is very volatile, and we've seen a lot of the introduction of a lot more fake news, fake analysis, fake data being produced, and at a time where we've seen the biggest vast amount of data being produced, how are organisations like yourselves understanding the role of data governance? And I don't just mean metadata, I mean the governance of that data to establish the trust, so that you can start doing more around collaboration to do that analysis, because everything we've talked about so far is about the analysis, the relationship, and building that, but we've missed the point of the underlining point is making sure you've got trust in that data. So how are you establishing that, and how are you going to take that forward in your organisations to make sure that you do improve the quality of the data and you don't see that data degradation?
So I would say that's probably for, maybe I'll start here and then we'll go down to the national agencies as well. So maybe start with
Yeah,
you,
sure.
Nigel.
So I mentioned the FAIR assessment that we did of the Geo6. So the organisations that we kind of look after from a custodian perspective. But we also added Q on the front, which is QFAIR. So looking at the quality of that data. And from that, we then created a data improvement group from across that team. And we also funded a number of data improvement projects. So I guess the couple of observations are authoritative data is a absolutely treasured national asset, and it's a very, I don't know whether it's a controversial thing, but those are the pieces of data that you really want to hold close as a nation. And probably not easily outsource or lightly outsource the collection and management of those data sets. And then the second thing is making sure that data is continuously improved. And so putting either incentives or collaborative communities together to make sure that you are creating not just fundamental data, but also the amalgamated data. And I think we've mentioned it a few times, which is kind of the view depends on where you stand. If you're standing inside the National Mapping Agency, then the mapping data it's okay. If you're standing as a consumer in an infrastructure company, then the mapping data may be fine, but it doesn't talk to the flood data, or it doesn't talk to the ownership data. Now, in that case, the geospatial data or the geographic data is not fine, because it's a silo and you can't use it. So I think thinking about the quality of data in a number of dimensions is healthy, and I think always thinking about it from the point of view of the consumer is critical, because otherwise you can be fantastic but absolutely useless when it comes to creating outcomes, great inputs but terrible outputs coming from your work. So a couple of observations.
Great. For those of you that don't know, Nigel was also the director of UK Ordnance Survey for how many years?
I thought you were going to say 100 years then. No, for 3 years.
Felt like 3 years. So again, speaking from a position of authority here. Did you want to add anything to what Nigel said around data governance to build trust, or do you think we...
I think I could add that, as Nigel said, the quality depends on the use as well, because up-to-dateness, for instance, is a quality which for some users is they want to know before something is happening, and other users, they say, well, I want the positional accuracy to be very important, and I can accept that. For that you need to collect data in another way than just take it out of the sensor information that comes from a car. So it is important that we talk about quality and that we understand the quality of that is asked for by the user. And this is a process of continuous interaction. But if you ask the user, what do you want? He will want a Rolls-Royce for the price of a Lada, I think. So that's also part of the discussion. What is the cost that society or the client is willing to pay? And it depends. Some people are ready to pay a lot of money for very high quality, and other people want it immediately, and they just pay a lot of money for immediate response, which maybe has not the same positional accuracy and so on. So it's very different, and I agree with you that it's a role of government is to make sure that they have a quality assured data set, especially when there are very important consequences to this information. You cannot have property information which is not really stable and valid. If you own a house, you want to be sure that you own the house even after the update of the database of cadastre. You don't want anybody else to see in that database. So, sorry, it's the definition of quality has many dimensions, and as a government, you have to pick your choices, what qualities you want to guarantee for your authoritative data, and what are the qualities you would like to achieve and do better on, but maybe in a less important part.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ingrid. I think maybe what we'll try and do is we're just a couple minutes over time. We started a few minutes late, so I'm going to take some license here and grab a couple of minutes. And we'll take maybe one more question. Did we have one more?
Tomak had a I think, a comment.
Just an observation. Okay.
Certainly, please. And then, sir.
All right, thank you, Ron. Firstly, my congratulations to Ingrid, Thomas, and Nigel. Being in the government for the last 4 years, I understand how hard it is to move the organization and to work against the inertia, to get people to share data, and how difficult it is to work with the organization. One question, I know, Ingrid, you mentioned about the issues regarding the lack of trained manpower to work with. Would you guys in the government be open to working with international partners to help you somehow mitigate that problem, to provide you solutions and to maybe provide you more labor-intensive workforce? And this question for Dean here from Esri. Earlier, about 4 years ago, I was in India and now moved to Canada. I'm seeing a lot of resource crunch, skilled workforce, which is not available. And there's a gap between the education institutions, like Ingrid said, they understand geography, they don't really understand what geospatial is, the schools and the colleges. It's for two reasons, because, and I've interacted with children from my son's class, they don't really see the visibility of understanding what geospatial is, and then how the visibility of understanding that education and getting that education would transform to become a professional in the industry. So a company like Esri, would you be open to conducting more on-premise education initiatives rather than doing conference calls and doing webinars, which students not nearly want to be interested in? And this is, I'm speaking from personal experience, I've been trying to do for the last about 1.5 years in Canada. And if it's not getting accepted in a country like Canada, you can imagine what's happening in India or in other places where the technology and the reach of internet is not as much. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. I think what we'll do is we'll take those offline, because I think there's some great questions around, the need for a broader labor force in the geospatial industry, which goes back to education and interest in inspiring the next generation, and then the role of companies like Esri in inspiring this. Maybe we'll take that one. Thank you for the comments.
Can I make a simple answer?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. That was your lightning round answer. We have one last question, and then we're going to wrap up. Please.
So, first of all, I'd like to thank the panel. I'm a student, so I'm just trying to absorb as much information today as I can, and it's really great to be here. So, I'm an environmental economy postgraduate at the Dutch University of Wageningen. It's a hot topic, and yeah, the geospatial applications in that realm are endless. So first of all, I'd like to take up Mr. Angelides' promise and exchange contacts after this session, since I'm currently looking for an internship in communication. And I believe Esri can certainly help me reach the next level.
Bravo.
So my question would be that...
Is Jürgen Sensitov, are you in the audience?
Yeah.
I'll find Jürgen for sure.
I don't see him. See him. He has a job for you.
That's great. Thank you so much.
And
so
if he doesn't, there's others up here that will. we need initiative.
Philip Mott, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay. See Philip. There's a hand.
Thank you
right
so
there.
much. So I would argue that the general public can sometimes be quite skeptical whether the intentions of a private company can even align with that of global sustainability. So when we talk about collaboration, how do the companies, especially the private companies here, aim to communicate that their collaboration does align with this sustainability?
Dean, maybe you. Again, you've got some of the best messaging out there on that. So.
Wow. Yeah. So first, Esri, as an organization, has always had a commitment to conservation and sustainability. I think you can look at our history over the years, many stories about that. So it starts with a top-level commitment, and that commitment spreads through the culture of Esri.
Yeah.
And we also learn a lot and also exchange a lot with our user community to enable them to also do that work. And that's probably the strongest thing that we have.
Yeah.
I think the next thing is just a series of programs of grants and so on. And then actually we're just now kicking off our own internal initiative around sustainability. I mean, in a sense, Esri has always, as I say, has always been committed to this. But we want to make a distinction between what's been known as, okay, you're a writer, greenwash, and actions that are actually leading to an outcome that makes us more sustainable. Yeah. So what are those things that Esri can provide tools to organizations to accomplish? So that's an internal initiative that we're just now kicking off. Yeah. I'll stop there.
Great. And I think we all have a role up here in sincere advocacy for what we can do. So thanks for your, by the way, thanks for your initiative and your great questions. So welcome. And I think I've probably gotten myself in enough trouble. So I think we're going to end it there. Thank you very much. Thanks for the engagement. And thank you very much for the panel. Really great job. Really appreciate it, everyone. Thank you.
Ron. Thank you, Ron, and all the panelists for driving us through how important collaboration is to drive sustainability, as well as to answer not only today's challenges, but also to solve tomorrow's problem and graduate to the next level of geospatial infrastructure. Thank you all.